The screaming started before the rain. At exactly 2:13 a.m., lightning split the sky above Awaken Academy, a prestigious boarding school hidden deep beyond red dust roads and towering baobab trees. The storm arrived without warning, violent winds rattling iron gates that had not been opened after midnight in nearly 30 years. Inside the dormitory, 16-year-old Zuberi Komonzi woke with a sharp gasp. Someone was whispering his name. Zuberi. He sat upright, heart hammering. The room was dark except for faint lightning flashes leaking through cracked window shutters. Around him, rows of metal beds held sleeping students, the smartest boys in the academy. Scholarship winners. Competition champions. The chosen ones. Another whisper slid through the air. Come outside. Zuberi froze. The voice wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from beneath his bed. A slow scratching sound followed. He jumped backward, knocking over his chair. Across the room, another student stirred but didn't wake. The scratching grew louder, deliberate, patient, like fingernails dragging across wood. Then it stopped. Silence swallowed the dormitory. Zuberi leaned forward slowly. Hello, he whispered. Lightning flashed. For a fraction of a second, a shadow stretched across the floor, long, thin, wrong. It moved against the direction of the light. His breath caught. The dormitory door suddenly slammed open. Every lamp flickered on at once. Standing there was Headmaster Maleko. Tall. Impossibly still. His grey traditional robe hung perfectly dry despite the storm outside. Silver tribal markings traced faint patterns along his neck, barely visible under the harsh lights. Behind him stood the silent school prefect, Maleko, holding a lantern that burned with an unnatural blue flame. All scholarship students, the headmaster said calmly. His voice carried without effort. Dress immediately. No greeting. No explanation. Students groaned awake one by one, confused. Sir, it's the middle of the night, someone muttered. Maleko smiled. It never reached his eyes. Excellence, he replied softly, does not follow ordinary hours. Zuberi noticed something strange. No teacher stood behind him. No guards. Only darkness filled the hallway beyond the lantern's glow. Rain pounded the roof as the boys dressed quickly. Outside thunder roared like distant drums. As they stepped into the corridor, Zuberi felt the temperature drop sharply. The walls were covered in symbols he had never seen before, chalk markings spiraling toward the floor like roots searching for something beneath the earth. Was this always here? Another boy whispered. No one answered. At the end of the hall, the academy's iron gates slammed shut by themselves. Clang. Several students jumped. Headmaster Maleko did not turn around. The ceremony begins tonight, he said quietly. Zuberi felt dread crawl into his chest. Because from somewhere deep beneath the school, something knocked. Once. Twice. Then a third time. And every lantern flame turned red. The knocking stopped. But the silence that followed felt worse. Zuberi and the other scholarship students stood frozen as the lantern flames burned an unnatural red. The corridor stretched endlessly ahead, darker than it should have been, as if the academy itself had swallowed the light. Headmaster Maleko began walking. No explanation. No hesitation. Amora followed behind him, her blue lantern now flickering violently as if resisting the darkness around them. Where are we going? One boy whispered. No answer. Their footsteps echoed through halls Zuberi had never seen before, and he had studied at Awaken Academy for 3 years. Doors lined the walls, each sealed with thick iron chains. Strange carvings crawled across the wood like living scars. Symbols. Hundreds of them. Some looked like eyes. Others like hands reaching upward. The air smelled damp and metallic. They reached a staircase at the far end. It spiraled downward. Deep underground. Cold air rushed upward as Maleko opened the rusted gate blocking the entrance. The hinges screamed loudly, the sound echoing far below as if something answered from the darkness. "Scholarship students first," he said calmly. Zuberi hesitated. Something inside him screamed not to move. Behind him, thunder cracked overhead, and suddenly the dormitory lights above went out completely. Total darkness. The only light left was Amora's lantern. One by one, the boys stepped down. The deeper they went, the quieter the storm became, until even the rain disappeared. Only breathing remained. And another sound. Dripping. Slow. Rhythmic. At the bottom waited a massive wooden door carved into stone. It opened by itself. Inside was not a classroom. It was a circular chamber. Candles burned along the walls, hundreds of them, surrounding a large symbol painted across the floor in dark red pigment. Wooden desks formed a ring around it, each desk holding a single notebook and a sharpened knife. Zuberi's stomach dropped. This isn't school," someone whispered. Maleko turned toward them. For the first time, his smile widened. "Tonight," he said softly, "you will demonstrate why you were chosen." Amora began calling names. Students stepped forward one by one, sitting at assigned desks. When Zuberi reached his seat, he noticed something horrifying. Every notebook already had writing inside. His handwriting. Pages filled with answers he had never written. Equations. Secrets. Memories. Even private thoughts. "What is this?" he whispered. Maleko raised his hands. "The first lesson," he announced. "The mind is the purest offering." The candles suddenly went out. Pitch darkness swallowed the chamber. A scream exploded somewhere behind Zuberi. Not fear. Pain. When the lights returned seconds later, one desk was empty. The chair still rocked slowly. And on the ritual symbol at the center of the room, fresh blood began spreading outward. Maleko sighed softly. "Oh," he murmured. "The ritual has made its first selection." Zuberi realized something terrible. The smartest students were not here to learn. They were here to be judged. No one moved. The empty chair continued rocking slowly as if the missing student had just stood up moments ago. Blood crawled across the ritual symbol at the center of the chamber, spreading like roots searching for soil. Zuberi couldn't breathe. Where did he go?" a boy whispered. No answer came. Headmaster Maleko walked calmly toward the center circle, stepping directly through the fresh blood without hesitation. His robe remained untouched, impossibly clean. "The first lesson," he said softly, "has begun." Amora's lantern burned brighter. Its blue flame turned violet. Zuberi noticed something else. The walls were moving. At first he thought it was shadows flickering from candlelight, but there were no candles anymore. The stone itself seemed to pour slowly, faint symbols appearing and disappearing like breathing skin. A low hum filled the chamber. Each student's notebook flipped open by itself. Pages turned rapidly. Stop. Every book landed on a single question written in thick black ink. Zuberi stared. The question wasn't mathematical. It wasn't academic. It read, "What would you sacrifice to become extraordinary?" Cold sweat slid down his neck. Around him students murmured nervously. "This is stupid," one boy said loudly. "It's some psychological experiment." He grabbed the knife from his desk angrily. "I didn't come here for games." Maleko smiled gently. Then answer honestly. The boy scoffed. I sacrifice nothing. The moment the words left his mouth, the floor beneath him cracked. Black shadows erupted upward like smoke turning solid. They wrapped around his arms and mouth before he could scream properly. The chamber echoed with choking sounds. Students jumped back in horror. Within seconds, he vanished. No blood. No struggle. Just an empty chair. The silence afterward felt heavier than death. Equim's voice echoed from somewhere unseen. The ritual rejects arrogance. Zuberi's hands trembled. This wasn't punishment. It was selection. Across the room another student began crying quietly. I'll answer anything, she whispered. She picked up the knife shakily and cut her palm. Blood dripped onto the notebook. I sacrifice pain, she sobbed. For a moment nothing happened. Then the symbol at the center glowed faintly. Her chair remained still. She survived. Gasps filled the chamber. Understanding spread quickly. The ritual wanted offerings. Real ones. Maleko walked slowly between desks like a teacher observing exams. Intelligence without honesty, he murmured, is useless to ancient wisdom. When he reached Zuberi, he stopped. Longer than with others. You were first in mathematics across 3 nations, the headmaster said quietly. Zuberi's stomach twisted. How do you know that? Maleko leaned closer. Because brilliance shines loudly to those who listen. The notebook in front of Zuberi changed. New words appeared. Ink spreading by itself. What do you fear losing most? His chest tightened. Images flashed through his mind. His younger sister. His village. Freedom. If he refused, he might disappear. If he sacrificed something, what would the ritual take? Around him students began cutting themselves, whispering answers, bargaining with unseen forces. The air filled with copper scent. Then, Ngozi screamed. Zuberi turned sharply. Her notebook burned black. Words formed across the page. Insufficient offering. Shadows surged toward her chair. Fast. Hungry. And for the first time, Headmaster Maleko did not intervene. The shadows recoiled after the first surge, but the chamber still thrummed with an invisible heartbeat. Every student sat frozen, knuckles white, knives trembling in their hands. The ritual wasn't satisfied. It had claimed one, and it wanted more. Then a whisper drifted through the room. Not Amara's. Not Maleko's. Something else. Zuberi. He turned sharply. The air above the central symbol rippled like water disturbed by a stone. A figure stepped from the shadows. At first, Zuberi thought it was the missing student, the one who had vanished during the first test. Jelani Momba. But something was wrong. Jelani's eyes were dark voids. His skin shimmered unnaturally, pale as if carved from marble. His smile was slow, wrong. Teeth too sharp, lips stretched in a grin that no human could hold. You can't be here, Zuberi whispered. Maleko's calm voice answered softly. He has returned, but he is no longer fully human. The ritual does not merely remove the unworthy. It reshapes them. Jelani tilted his head, a mechanical grace in his movements. Shadows clung to him like wet cloth. When he stepped forward, the candles flickered violently, though no wind disturbed them. Students shrank back. He speaks, whispered a girl, her voice trembling. Jelani's mouth moved. I live because the ritual feeds on more than just fear. It feeds on brilliance, obedience, and soul. And now, it chooses again. The chamber's floor vibrated. Symbols glowed brighter. The black ink across the notebooks writhed like living creatures. Maleko's eyes reflected the crimson light. Today, he said slowly, the ritual would test its finest offerings. Those who survive this test may live, and those who fail. Jelani stepped toward the desk. His shadow stretched unnaturally, reaching across the floor and wrapping around a trembling student. The boy screamed, but the shadow didn't kill. Not yet. It whispered. Words he couldn't understand but felt deep in his chest: fear, submission, temptation. Zuberi realized the first lesson was far from over. The ritual had claimed Jelani's body, but his mind, his essence, was now a weapon. A warning. A mirror. You see, Maleko said, eyes glinting, the brightest students are not the safest. The ritual does not merely test knowledge, it tests the very essence of who you are. Will you bend? Will you obey? Or will you break? Jelani reached out, shadow fingers inching toward Zuberi. And for the first time, Zuberi understood, the ritual did not forgive. It never had. The whispers rose into a chorus. Every notebook shook violently. Every knife vibrated. And then, a low, gurgling laugh echoed from somewhere beneath the stone floor. The chamber wasn't just alive. It was hungry. The chamber's air had turned thick, almost solid. Every student's lungs burned, hearts thudding like war drums. Zuberi's fingers clutched the knife so tightly his knuckles whitened. The transformed Jelani lingered at the center, a puppet of shadows and intelligence, watching silently. Maleko's voice echoed through the chamber, calm yet terrifying. The ritual is older than this academy. Older than your ancestors. It was not born to teach, it was born to choose. Only those who prove their essence worthy may survive. Essence, worthy. Zuberi whispered, voice trembling. Yes, Maleko said. Brilliance alone is meaningless. Courage alone is hollow. You must offer what the ritual demands, not what you wish to give. The students exchanged panicked glances. The notebooks flipped open on their own. Each page revealed names, secrets, fears, and ambitions, written in a black ink that moved like living veins. Zuberi's stomach sank. The ritual had seen them. It knew everything. Young scholars, Maleko continued, stepping closer to the central symbol, the ritual does not merely take. It reflects. What you fear, what you desire, and what you are willing to sacrifice, it will mirror back at you. And it will punish dishonesty. He lifted his hands, and the candles surged in flame, shadows dancing wildly along the walls. Jelani's dark eyes seemed to pierce each student's soul. Zuberi's mind raced. His thoughts flickered to his sister, to his village, to his parents, everything he loved. Could he betray them to survive? Could he offer his own essence to save others? Another voice whispered. Not Maleko's. Not human. Sacrifice, or perish. Every student trembled. One by one, hands reached toward the knife, dripping blood onto the notebooks. Each offering caused symbols on the floor to glow brighter. The ritual was testing them. Every hesitation amplified the whispers. Every lie echoed into shadow. Zuberi's turn came. He knelt, staring into the black ink swirling across his page. What does it want from me? He muttered, voice barely audible. The answer was immediate. The shadows beneath Jelani surged upward, forming a vortex around Zuberi. Images flashed, wealth, ambition, friends, family, each choice carved into his mind like a warning. Maleko stepped closer. This ritual, he said quietly, is the mirror of your soul. If you cheat it, it will consume more than your life. If you embrace it honestly, you may survive, but at a cost beyond imagining. Zuberi's chest tightened. He understood now. The ritual didn't just select students for knowledge or obedience. It demanded truth, courage, and the willingness to sacrifice what mattered most. Around him, shadows writhed. The ritual waited, hungry, patient, unforgiving. And for the first time, Zuberi realized, survival would require more than intelligence. It would demand everything he was willing to give, and everything he was terrified to lose. The chamber fell silent, for a heartbeat. Then the first scream echoed. It came from a girl who had refused to offer herself honestly. The ritual had marked its first human failure. The chamber's shadows paused like living hearts, reacting to every whisper, every heartbeat. Zuberi's hands shook over the knife. Each notebook page now displayed the essence of its owner, fears, desires, secrets, all exposed for the ritual to judge. Amora stepped forward first. She caught her palm and pressed it onto the notebook. The symbol on the floor glowed faintly. Relief washed over her face, but only for a moment. The ritual demanded honesty, not fear alone. Jelani's hollow eyes followed her. Zuberi realized the transformed student was no longer human, he was the ritual's mirror, showing what each could become if they failed. The room felt alive, judging. When it was Zuberi's turn, he stared at his own page. It showed everything, his sister, his village, his dreams. The shadows stretched toward him, hungry, impatient. He couldn't betray his family, yet the ritual required an offering. Heart hammering, he made a choice. Using the knife, he drew a deep line along his forearm, letting blood drip slowly onto the notebook. Not to cheat, not to trick the ritual, but to show sacrifice of what mattered most. The symbols on the floor fled. Shadows recoiled. Zuberi felt a strange surge, a pulse of energy flowing through him. The ritual acknowledged his truth. Around him, other students gasped. Some had barely survived, others were trembling, realizing the true cost of dishonesty. Maleko's calm voice filled the chamber. Intelligence without courage is meaningless, he said. And courage without honesty is meaningless to forces older than this academy. Zuberi's chest heaved. He understood, surviving the ritual wasn't about answers or cleverness, it was about facing your fears, being honest, and offering what you could bear to lose. But even as he caught his breath, a whisper slithered from the shadows. The test is far from over. The chamber grew colder. Every shadow stretched unnaturally, clinging to the student's skin like living ink. Zuberi's blood still glimmered on his notebook. He breathed heavily, heart hammering. But the ritual was far from finished. Headmaster Maleko stepped forward, his face illuminated by the violet-blue lanterns. Zuberi noticed a change, his eyes were no longer human. Deep crimson veins radiated from his irises, and the tribal markings across his neck writhed like they were alive. This ritual, Maleko whispered, voice low and measured, was never about selecting the brightest students for excellence. It chooses those who can bear the cost of true power. A shiver ran down Zuberi's spine. The walls paused. Shadows crawled closer. Jelani stepped beside Maleko, still twisted, still half-human, a silent warning of what the ritual demanded. You think knowledge is enough? Maleko asked, voice echoing unnaturally. This academy is a gateway. The ritual feeds on ambition, on desire, on the willingness to offer what you love most. And in return, it grants, he paused, smiling slowly, something beyond mortal understanding. Zuberi's stomach twisted. He realized now why Maleko had no teachers behind him, no guards, he was the ritual itself. Every lesson, every test, every vanished student, it was Maleko's power, growing stronger with each offering. Another student whimpered. Maleko turned, eyes piercing. Do you understand? You cannot hide. You cannot bargain. You may escape, but the ritual will find you. Your mind, your soul, your courage, all will be weighed. Zuberi clenched his fist. Fear surged, but beneath it, a spark of defiance. To survive, he had to confront the ritual itself, to understand Maleko's dark secret, and to make a choice no student had yet dared: sacrifice without compromise, or be consumed. The shadows surged around the headmaster and Jelani, twisting like living serpents. The ritual waited, patient, eternal, and merciless. The final test was about to begin. The chamber vibrated with an ancient pulse. Shadows twisted violently across the walls, curling around the trembling students. Zuberi's blood still seeped onto his notebook, but it was not enough. The ritual demanded more courage, more honesty, more sacrifice. Headmaster Maleko stepped into the center circle, his crimson-veined eyes glowing with an unholy light. Jelani, still half transformed, lingered beside him, a living mirror of what awaited those who failed. You have survived the first trials, Maleko said softly, voice resonating unnaturally. But survival does not guarantee mastery. The ritual judges your essence, every fear, every desire, every truth you refuse to face. The notebooks across the room began to tremble. Pages flipped violently, revealing the students' deepest secrets. Every shadow in the chamber pulsed in rhythm with the ritual, like a heartbeat syncing with their fear. Zuberi's gaze fell on the central symbol. The blood on it writhed, forming faces, twisted, anguished, and familiar. The ritual was alive. It remembered every student who had been taken, every truth that had been denied. You must choose, Maleko whispered. Sacrifice what is precious, or let it claim more than your life. Zuberi swallowed, his mind racing. Each student had faced their test, but only he understood the true cost. He stepped forward, placing his hand over the symbol. Shadows recoiled but did not vanish. His blood dripped onto the mark, and a low hum filled the chamber, almost approving. The ritual's energy surged. Flames danced unnaturally across the walls. For a heartbeat, silence fell. Then a voice echoed from the darkness, cold and commanding. Part 2 begins, and the true choice remains. The ritual's test is far from over, and the student's true fate awaits. Who will survive the next challenge, and who will be consumed? Find out in Part 2.